Good evening and welcome to Keese School. Tonight okay. Thank you. All right. There you go. And welcome to Keese School. Would ask you to turn off your cell phones if you happen to have them with you so that we don't have a ringing in the middle. Tonight we have really Dr. Stone Street. He's been here at least 4 or 5 times. We've lost count at this point. But it's an 18th century doctor he portrays, and it's really great. His real name is Clarence Hickey. He lives in Wallace, and he does butterflies. And he'll tell you every little detail you'd like to know about them, including tagging them and just taking care of them, what to feed them type of thing. In recent years, the eastern monarch butterfly population has significantly reduced, in part due to the elimination of milkweed. And many people are not planting it anymore, and they need that for their food. So let's welcome Clarence here.
Thank you very much. Hear me okay? Oh, great, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, especially since my wife Mary, sitting right here in the middle. We are now Wallace residents as of last June, so it's not quite a year. But we have been very fortunate to be here and in this wonderful place and to be welcomed by so many people. And I have to say that our neighborhood, the 3rd floor in Wallace, is the best. So I want to thank several people tonight, and one, if my slides will help me out here, and it's not. There we go. Montgomery History, the Montgomery County Historical Society, where I've been a volunteer for 25 years or so, sponsors a lot of the volunteer work that I do, including programs like this. Now, the Historical Society takes this program and puts it into a category that they call natural history and human history, because the two are linked. And you'll see a bit of that here tonight, I hope. All right, let's see. So, thank you, Asbury. It's a wonderful place. We're glad to be here. And especially with the Keese School. I have been very fortunate to have had the opportunity to help the Keese School a few times in the past, and it's just a magnificent organization, magnificently run, and all the people who do it are smiling all the time, having a good time. Oop, wrong way here. Some of you may remember Mary Lou Luff. She and I were volunteers in the Historical Society together for many years, maybe 20 years, plus or minus. We partnered many times on doing historical interpretive programs around the county, and we offered a couple here. I think the last one here maybe was like 2019, before Mary Lou moved, but she was just a gem, and I enjoyed very much my time to be with her. So my program this evening is on conservation of monarch butterflies, which to some degree may be sort of a canary in the mine, a canary in the environmental mine of the USA, maybe even North America. I've observed monarchs actually here on site at Asbury. When we were here last fall, we were in the community garden, and there were a lot of monarchs on the flowers there. I want to talk about some of this. And I suspect you all have seen the monarchs around. I'll be really interested to hear what your experience with monarchs might be here at Asbury. But a little bit to learn here. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to offer up some ideas on how we might work together as a community on monarch conservation, or to continue some of what you may already be doing. Asbury is really well positioned to contribute to monarch conservation, our 130 acres, and I'll show you some of this. And I think it'll offer up some opportunities where we could work together. So this slideshow you're going to see tonight, I have offered versions of this PowerPoint lecture to many community organizations in Montgomery County and across the river in Virginia. A few of the organizations have included members who are hearing challenged. So in order to be better able to present my video message here to them, my PowerPoint slides all have captions embedded in them to make them understandable. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that. And I have a few brief videos that I've taken that are embedded in the PowerPoints we've tried them out, they work so far. I hope they'll work again here. And you'll notice that with the videos especially, I used my cell phone to take the videos. My unsteady hand, you have to deal with that, I guess. But we'll see how that goes. So this is what I hope we can do today. It looks like a lot, but I'm sure we can get there. Talking about monarch, the migration and conservation of the monarchs, milkweed and flowers and their dependence on those. And I'll give you a little bit of kind of the biology, the natural history of monarchs, and a bit of what I did to really learn firsthand about what they are and what they do, and how I did that at home, and how my raising the caterpillars in my home took over my workshop and my family room. You can talk to my wife about that. So, and I got involved for 3 years with a citizen science program, and I'll talk about that, where I applied wing tags to the butterflies that I released. And we'll work through some of this. And the monarch has as of December 12, 2024, was proposed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be a threatened species. And the public comment, the 90-day public comment period on that proposal ends this Wednesday, on the 12th. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And there's a little bit of disagreement among the science community about whether it should be listed or not. So we'll see about that. And then I've got some books and resources and things to share with you if you'd like. So let's see if we can do this. So this is what we're going to do tonight. It's going to be more about monarchs than me, I hope, and talk about what we did in our backyard, our little postage stamp backyard in Aspen Hill, Maryland, where we lived for 48 years. So this is you're probably familiar with some of this. This is the monarch's journey between their overwintering home in central Mexico and their breeding habitat through the United States and into Canada. This is an international traveling species. And that in itself raises some of the issues of how to conserve it, because different areas, different countries might have a little bit of a different sense of the monarch. So what you can see here is way down. See if my arrow works. Can you see my arrow? Right here? So down here in central Mexico is where the overwintering sites are. And I'll show you a little bit more about this. Where they overwinter. And then in the springtime, the late winter, early spring, they start a northern migration, these green arrows, where they come up, mostly coming up through Texas to begin, and then spreading out, going across the USA, east of the Rocky Mountains, and then up into Canada. And the northern range of the monarchs, right up here in southern Canada, the northern range of the monarchs is the northern range of milkweed. No milkweed, no monarchs. So, and that's part of the issue that they're having right now. And then in the fall, back down again, back going home to Mexico. And it's a very interesting life cycle. And then over in California, there's a population of monarchs that live along the coast, basically between LA and San Francisco. And they fly around, migrate during the summer, but they don't cross the mountains. So there's a western population and the large eastern population. The largest population of monarchs in the world is the eastern USA, where we are. And I'll show you a little bit of this as we go through this. And this is just another look at that humble plant called milkweed that the monarch relies on. And they rely on that because the milkweed is the only food source that the caterpillars can eat. They eat nothing but milkweed. Without milkweed, there's no monarchs. And so part of the issue here is coming up through the agricultural belt in the US of A, where there's a lot of agriculture and pesticides and herbicides to protect the crops. And sometimes what is being used not only protects the crops, but harms the caterpillars or the butterflies. So that's part of the issue. And with the milkweed being reduced, the herbicides work against the milkweed, which works against the monarchs. Part of the problem too with, well, let me finish here first. This is central Mexico. This is that belt of very high mountainous pine trees. The elevation here where the monarchs overwinter is between about 7,000 and 14,000 feet high. And for my wife and I, we relate that to 7,000 feet as the Grand Canyon near where our daughter lives in Arizona. That's high country. And 14,000 feet is about the Pikes Peak, which we did a few years ago. So that's very high, and that's where the monarchs overwinter. And this is, again, can you see up here in the upper right? This is that central place in Mexico, and there's this little tiny postage stamp here, represented by this box outlined in red over here, is where the monarchs overwinter. There are 12 sites in this high mountainous pine forest where the monarchs gather and overwinter. And that is where the population is monitored by the World Wildlife Fund and some others to get an idea of how's the population doing in central Mexico. And this is the most recent data. I got this data last Thursday. I've been watching for it and finally got the latest information. This is a graph that shows the area occupied by the monarchs at those 12 sites in the highlands of central Mexico. And this is actually, it says here, total acres going up, and then the years on the horizontal here, starting in 1993, 1994, and going to the present. This is the most recent data here that was collected in December of 24 and added to this chart. So if you look at this, back in the late 1990s, the total acreage that was occupied by the monarchs during the winter, in that December timeframe, was about 45 acres. 45 acres in 12 sites. To put that in perspective, 45 acres would be about plus or minus about a third of the land we have here at Asbury. 130 some acres we have here. So that's about a third of that. All the millions of butterflies that come up from Mexico to the US and Canada and then go back south are going back to that little site of 45 acres. And then coming to more recent times here, this last year, the scientists determined that the area occupied by the monarchs was less than 4.5 acres. That's been the difference. And the downward trend, up and down and up and down and up and down. Some of the scientists are saying, well, yeah, the population is much lower than historically, but for the last 10 years or so, 2015 or so up to today, the population has been low, but steady. So maybe they're not really threatened. That's what some of the scientists are thinking. So this is the eastern population. Now this is the western one. This is the population that lives in California and overwinters along the coast of California between LA and San Francisco. And this is actually, the way they've done this is actually, they have a numerous task force of volunteers who go out, led by the scientists, and they actually count the butterflies. How many like the Christmas bird count that we see. This is the butterfly count. And so back in the late 90s, they were counting about 1.2 million along the coast, and more recently it's been significantly less. And this is one of the things that the Fish and Wildlife Service is talking about in their draft proposed regulations to list the species as threatened and in need of some protection. So this is the western population, and this is where the Fish and Wildlife Service is saying we need to be really careful, and in their proposed rule, they have identified these areas as critical habitat. This is what they're proposing. Now, whether it ends up this way, we'll see. But LA to the south here, and San Francisco up here to the north, and all these places in between, you probably know a bunch of these places: Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis, Monterey, Santa Cruz, Alameda, and Marin. And there are specific places in here where the monarchs actually overwinter along the beaches in the pine trees. And the Fish and Wildlife Service is saying these are the places we need to be careful about. And we need to declare some of these as critical habitat, not to be messed with, human hands off. And so we'll see how that all works out, what the rule ends up being. The rule comment period closes on Wednesday, and it'll probably be, I don't know, by the end of the year or so before we know what'll happen, whether in fact the species will be listed as threatened and in need of protection, or whether they'll say, well, maybe not right now. We'll see. So this is back to the eastern population now, and those people who watch the migration as the butterfly begins heading north in the springtime. Where is it first seen, and when is that? So this is just a representation of the number of first sightings and the time frame, March and April, along the bottom. And so between the 1st of March and mid-March or so is when they were mostly seen first. So right now, as you and I are talking here, the monarchs may well be entering Texas on their trip north. And this is kind of what they look like sometimes when they're gathering. This photo was taken by a friend of mine in New York. Excuse me a minute. My friend is a wildlife biologist on Long Island. And there's a lot of pine trees along the beaches on Long Island. And my friend goes out there in the fall, late summer and the fall, watching, and he sees this. The monarchs that are heading south congregate at night. They don't fly at night. They don't fly when it gets really cold. They have trouble flying in the rain. But this is what he sees crossing Long Island, coming from the places north, as this butterfly is going back to a place it's never seen and never been, and does that without a GPS or a blue line on the screen. So what do you call a group of monarchs? Is it a pod or a herd? Well, some people say it's a swarm or a rabble. I don't know, neither of those really sound respectful, but we can go with that. So, the monarchs, when they are heading north, as they are probably right now, they don't just fly from central Mexico to Canada. It takes 4 or 5 generations for them to reach their northern latitude. And the butterflies will live for 2 to 6 weeks. So the butterflies that leave central Mexico are heading north. They'll get into Texas, find some milkweed, lay the eggs on the milkweed. The adults will eventually die, the butterflies. The eggs will hatch, turn into caterpillars, become a chrysalis, become an adult, and head north. And they'll find milkweed a few weeks away, and do that again. And they'll do that 4 or 5 times in order to get to the northern place where they'll be going. The northern place might be southern Canada, or it might just be the northern areas around the US of A. But it takes 4 generations. The last generation, which I think is the one we see here in the fall, that beginning to head south, doesn't do that generational reproduction. It flies all the way home, 2,800, 3,000 miles, all the way home to a place it's never been and never seen. This delicate little butterfly does that. It's really quite amazing. So, just a little bit about, this was my backyard. You're going to get a nice little view of my postage stamp backyard. Milkweed coming up. This is in April. I'd start to see it coming up in April. And this is the common milkweed species. part of the problem milkweed is having in being cut down and not respected is that it has the word weed in its name. It is not a weed. It is a native, North American native wildflower. It just happens to have the word weed. And there are some of the scientists who've been working on this. One is Professor Douglas Tallamy, who wrote a nice book about the environment and nature's best hope, talking about monarchs. And he said, we need to change the name. Milkweed has to become something different that people can respect and not think, if I have milkweed, it's going to look awful in my yard. So he says, how about a name like Monarch's Delight? I could support that. In fact, during the public comment period on the Fish and Wildlife Service regulations, I wrote to the Fish and Wildlife Service. I commented on the regulations. I couldn't offer them any new science. But I said, I held up this idea from Professor Tallamy and some others, saying that part of the problem is that people think this is a weed, and so they don't want it. So I know the regulations can't regulate changing the name, but maybe in the discussion it could be stated that the way people could help would be to do something like finding a better way to call this species. And the regulations in the Fish and Wildlife Service have acknowledged that public participation in the conservation should continue. The regulations will not prohibit that. So this is all going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. So this is the milkweed that was in my yard, growing in my yard. I had 2 nice stands of it. The bell of flowers is called an umbel. You probably knew that. But it's very interesting as the plant. Let me see if I can do this. Let's try this. Oops, uh-oh. What did I do? No. All right, let's try again. Gonna do this. Gonna come over. Here we go. All right. So as the plant grows, the umbel of flowers appear, and so the most mature of the flowers are the ones lower, and as the plant grows, it produces more pods of flowers or umbels of flowers, so the ones at the very top are not opened yet. So actually, a plant in the yard coming up in April will have flowers most of the summer because of the way it lives. So it's really quite a nice plant. And then, see if I can do this again. If you really look at the flower, milkweed flower is really quite pretty. And it's very fragrant, lots of nectar, and it's a magnificent thing. So you can see how these pods, when they're growing, each pod can have a seed pod of several hundred seeds. And it's a very pretty plant. And I noticed in our yard that when you have milkweed, you are blessed with all kinds of other insects, including a lot of different pollinators. The last several years, honeybees have not been too common around my place in Rockville until I had milkweed. And the honeybees would show up for that, as would the bumbles. I think the bumbles were doing most of the pollinating work in my yard for the last several years. Different varieties of bumblebees, and they're hard workers, and very common. You can when I had this stand of milkweed and all these bumbles on it, I could go out and walk through this stand and it didn't bother the bumbles. They just went about their business. And then also many different varieties of butterflies, including isn't that nice? This is a several-minute video. I could just watch the whole thing, but we'll keep moving. And when you have insects in your yard and something that really attracts them, if you're fortunate, you might have a praying mantis. We had praying manti several years. Some years, none at all. And some years, they'd be a bunch out there looking for and finding a meal in the milkweed patch. And in 2021, the milkweed in my yard did double duty. In the springtime, you may remember the brood 10 periodical cicadas that year. And so the milkweed came up in April, and in May, the cicadas emerged. And so by the time the cicadas were looking for something to climb and shed their skins and become the flying adult, there were milkweed. So in the springtime of 21, my milkweed helped my cicada friends. And later that year, they helped the monarchs. So when you have milkweeds in your yard, be prepared, because you also get lots of other things that come somehow with milkweed. Where they come from and how it happens is kind of a mystery. But with milkweed come aphids. And these are standard. They don't seem to do much damage or much harm, but they're there in numbers, and they're really tiny. You know, tiny like almost like a period at the end of a sentence, a little bigger than that. But then if you have aphids and you're blessed, you also get, if I can make this work, just because. Oh, there we go. Yeah, ladybugs, or ladybird beetle is their proper name. Ladybird beetle, looking for an aphid meal. So ladybirds were welcome in my yard. And then this, also when you get milkweed, there are some other things that just happen, they just come with milkweed. And I'm not sure where they come from, but there are two kinds of milkweed beetles. Perfectly harmless, don't carry any diseases, don't sting or bite. And they sometimes come in numbers. And you can see here the whole life cycle. Here are the ones with the Baltimore Oriole colors, our baseball team, the adults, then some juveniles, and then over here on the right-hand side, some little tiny ones probably just hatched. It's kind of the whole life cycle right there. And they've got those good Maryland colors. Don't you love that? And then also, the longhorn milkweed beetle is one that's not quite as numerous, but also you can see that one there, and you can guess why it's called the longhorn. Well, the milkweed flowers, by the end of the summer, are producing these seed pods, and I've got some here if anybody wants to see them. I also have some books and things which we can show you out in the lobby if you're interested in seeing some of these things. But these pods that produce the flowers, and then usually I'd say in October or so, plus or minus, in the early fall, is when the seed pods dry out, they split open, and the seeds are airborne, windborne. And I'll show you where you can see these here at Asbury. This is what they look like. They're very, very prolific. Now, let me do this. I was the neighbor in Aspen Hill who provided milkweed seeds to the neighborhood because they're windborne. I was also the neighbor who, in my yard, we used no chemicals, no pesticides or herbicides. We had a compost pile for helping us with fertilizing. And so all kinds of things would come up in the yard. And we get a lot of different kind of wildflowers. When the wildflowers would come up, I'd mow around them until they were done, then I'd mow them down. But every year I got a couple of these bull thistles would show up in the yard, and I'd let one or two of them grow because they too have these nice, fragrant, pretty flowers that attract pollinators. It's hard to see it here, but there's some bumblebees on some of these. So I would let those grow. And you can see how tall they got. That's me behind there, so that may not be saying too much. I'm not that tall. But a bull thistle also has windborne seeds. So I was the neighbor who provided the neighborhood with thistle. And then, of course, you probably know these. These are some of the first flowers to come up in the springtime that the pollinators can use, dandelions. And who doesn't, a little kid or big kids don't like to go and blow it. So I was the neighbor who provided airborne seeds of milkweed, thistle, and dandelion. When we moved in June, the neighbors probably said goodbye. So back to the main topic here, about the bit of the life cycle of the monarch. Monarchs lay their eggs on the underside of the milkweed leaves, and a female monarch can lay 400 or 500 eggs. Let's see if we can do this again. There. This female monarch is holding on tight and laying an egg on the underside of the leaf. And the underside is a good place because it helps give a little cover and protection to the egg and the young caterpillar, and maybe a little cover from the weather. And the monarchs will lay 1 egg per plant. Now, the female can lay 400 or 500 eggs, but 1 per plant. The scientists think that has to do with the, we might say it's some kind of an insect social distancing. I'm stretching it here a bit. But that means that when that egg hatches, that caterpillar has that entire plant to itself for 2 weeks of food, all by itself. And that seems to work. So when we think about social distancing, maybe they had it first. Well, I'll say a little more about that. But it takes 4 or 5 days for the egg to hatch, depending on the temperature. Let me see if we can. There we go. And this is hard to see this. But this is the underside of the leaf there with the. You can't see my pointer maybe, but there's the tiny egg, and it looks like this up close, smaller than a grain of rice. It's very, very tiny. And then it hatches in 4 or 5 days. And the caterpillar that emerges from that might be less than 1/10 of an inch long. They're very tiny on the underside of a leaf. So how in the world do you find it? So what I used to do when I was trying to keep track of things, I'd watch for when the monarchs were coming through our yard and into our milkweed patch in usually August, September, plus or minus. And I'd watch to where the females appeared to be laying eggs. And I'd go out and put a garden stake or something near that plant so I could remember where it was, because it's very hard to see these little eggs. But I learned that once the caterpillar hatches and begins to eat the milkweed, they do so in this kind of a semicircular pattern. So I'd go out, look for this semicircular pattern of munch holes on the milkweed, turn it over, and find the caterpillar. Or I'd walk out there with one of my big hand mirrors and hold it under the leaves to look and see, to find the caterpillars and to see them. 1 per plant. That female did a good job. She knows what she's doing. I'm trying to move forward here. There we go. So a caterpillar, like the adult, with the several generations, but this is 1 generation of caterpillar, but it will shed its skin 4 or 5 times as it grows from that little tiny caterpillar to a full-grown caterpillar, which is maybe 2 inches long, 1 3/4 to 2 inches long, and sheds its skin as it grows, and it'll do that 4 or 5 times, and it'll be a caterpillar for about 2 weeks. And this is one that has just climbed out of that skin, leaving it behind. It's kind of the same way you might think about a snake has to shed that skin in order to grow, or our native blue crab has to climb out of that skin, become a soft shell for about, as it grows bigger. It can't grow inside the shell, so it has to leave that old skin behind. Same thing for this caterpillar doing that. And as it grows, it becomes a little more colorful, and the antennae grow a little bigger, the longer antennae being at the head end, and the shorter antennae being at the hind end. And this was out in my garden with an almost full-grown caterpillar, about 2 inches long, plus or minus, and seemed to be doing pretty well. The caterpillar, and I'll show you how it does this, but the caterpillar will then, once it's finished eating and the hormones say it's time, it finds a place to attach the chrysalis. Can you see the chrysalis in here on this slide? There it is, right there in the middle, hanging underneath that milkweed leaf, which is very unusual. Usually, the caterpillars will not attach a chrysalis to the milkweed plant where they've been living. They'll climb down off that plant, cross some distance, and find something else to attach the chrysalis, a tree, a weed, or something on my back deck, the wooden back deck. They'd sometimes find it there. So I was watching, when I first got involved in doing this a few years ago, I was watching the life cycle out in my garden, trying to keep track of it. And I saw a number of females laying eggs. I saw a number of caterpillars over time, but I saw no resulting butterflies. I said, what happened? Turns out that the natural mortality for monarchs is about 95%. Yeah, a young egg has about a 5% chance of becoming an adult and flying home. So there's a lot of different aspects of the natural mortality. I've got a little bit of that here. So I thought, well, maybe I could help them out. So the next year, I got a couple of tubs, and I rigged it up so I could give it fresh milkweed every day, and put a net over it to try to keep things in tow. And this was partly in my workshop, partly in our basement, and then it eventually morphed into our family room. So let me show you see if I can do this. This is what was going on in those tubs. This is what a caterpillar does for 2 weeks. 4 or 5 days as an egg, 2 weeks as a caterpillar. This is what it does. Eat, 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 and poop, poop, poop. Sorry about that. But you can see down here at the bottom, these little green thing, it's called frass. It's a nice name. But it means that every day they eat so much and put out so much frass that I had to clean the tubs every day and give them fresh milkweed every day. So this was actually, I did this with my cell phone. You too could do this. If I can do it, you can do it. And then this is a situation which would not occur in nature. But I was strapped for space here. Before I had ordered this big butterfly net from Amazon, and it took a while to arrive. So I had to improvise. So I used these tubs for a while. And this was one of the tubs in which I had 6 caterpillars and enough fresh milkweed every day and enough frass every day, so I had to clean it out every day. But this would not occur in nature. These caterpillars would not have a community like this. There'd be one per plant. And so you'll see here a little bit of an unusual situation. We might even learn here who's the alpha caterpillar. Not that they would do this in nature. And this is one of the things that the Fish and Wildlife Service is saying in their draft regulations. They offered caution for people who want to help the monarchs by raising them in their homes like I did. And they seem to say that if you're just doing a few like this, that's probably not bad. But some people will raise several hundred. And they say that keeping them together like that eliminates that natural social distance and helps with the spread of disease and parasites. So they caution against that. But this is what I did. And if nothing else, it gave me an education about what monarchs are really all about and got me to reading and learning. So this was inside of that little habitat that I prepared before I moved them into the butterfly net. You see there's a couple of chrysalides. Some people say chrysalises. Chrysalides slides off the tongue easier. These 2 chrysalides, and there's one caterpillar that's found just the right place. After about 2 weeks of eating, they stop eating and they start wandering and looking for a place to attach themselves so they can transform to a chrysalis for about 2 weeks, plus or minus, and then emerge as the butterfly and head home. And so this one here, you'll see right in the middle, is hanging upside down, head down, and in a J shape. And the scientists call these J hangers. And this is what they do for, in this case, in my data, 16 or 17 hours as a J hanger before they transform to becoming a chrysalis for another 10, 12, 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks. So this is what they look like. This is my unsteady hand with my cell phone taking a video. This is the J hanger that is shedding its skin for the last time to become the chrysalis. And I'm going to speed this up because this is several minutes. But as you'll see, as we speed this up, you'll see that the dark skin works its way up. And this J hanging, not caterpillar, not chrysalis, but something in between, is moving and gyrating, getting rid of the skin. And with time, it moves it up. It moves it up. Pretty soon, this chrysalis to be is going to decide, I don't need this skin anymore. What am I going to do with it? Have patience. Yay. And this is what it does then for a while it's getting ready to transform to become a chrysalis, and then it slows down and stops. It's beginning to look like those other ones that are hanging nearby that have already gone through all of this to become a chrysalis. So this is not, the monarch does not build a cocoon around it like some moths do. The chrysalis is actually part of the butterfly. The body transforms from the caterpillar to the chrysalis. Got my butterfly tent, took over a piece of my family room where we like to eat and have guests. So we did have guests for a while. They were butterflies. So inside, this is what it looked like, at least the first time I used it, when I transferred all the chrysalides into this tent. So there'd be room for the butterflies when they emerged. So I have 8 of them in here. And this is what the chrysalis looks like up close and personal. It's only about 1 inch long. It's very tiny. This butterfly that flies 3,000 miles from Canada to Mexico lives in a 1-inch chrysalis and then becomes this dainty-looking butterfly. So I'm watching this in my tent every day to see how they're doing. One day I go and look, and this is what I say. I go, oh, I've killed it. What did I do wrong? But I kept watching, and this is what was going on. Yeah, the green chrysalis is now just about ready. And this is what I watched. This is a 2-minute video, and I'm going to just play the whole thing for you. My unsteady hand here, I'm sorry. Head down, tail up. Pretty soon you'll see this creature let go at the top. There we go. Isn't that a miracle? And so by the time it gets to this point, from the egg to this point, it's been about a month, plus or minus. And the butterfly will hold on to the cuticle. Typically, that's what they do. They grasp onto the cuticle for the next several hours, while you see the abdomen is really swelled here. It's got the fluid, the hemolymph, the blood, that it's going to pump into the wings to expand the wings. And as the wings expand, the abdomen will shrink. And it needs time to do that, and it needs a little bit of Isaac Newton's gravity to help it. This guy's doing just fine. There's got plenty of room in my tent, in my family room. I'm showing you all this because there's another one I want to show you where the butterfly lost its grip. But this guy seems to be doing fine. And the ones that when we release them, the recommendations are that when you're doing this, you need to release them within 24 hours. Within the first 24 hours or so, they're just maturing, the wings are expanding, they're getting ready, and they don't eat. But when you release them, within the next day or so, they need to find a food source, find some flowers, and begin their journey. So here's a couple of them in there. There's a younger one in the background and one in the front here, that seems to be doing really well with the wings expanded. The cuticle is a safe place, but there was this one. I was watching the butterflies in the tent, and this particular one lost its grip on the cuticle and fell. Fortunately, I had some soft material on the bottom just in case, and I just happened to be there. And when it fell, I unzipped it, went in and picked it up and held it up to the top of the tent until it got a good grip, and I let go. And when we released it the next day, it did fine. But that's part of the natural mortality. Out in the wild, if a butterfly loses its grip and falls to the ground, and can't find a way to get back up so gravity can finish the wings, then it may not be able to fly. It might become prey, and it won't be part of the reproducing population. So that's one of the aspects of the natural mortality. And this is what's left behind. I just like this. It looks like an old 1950s black and white sci-fi movie with a space helmet. Now we're getting ready to do the good thing here, to release the butterfly. So we would take them outside and not toss them in the air, but let the butterfly decide what to do. And you will notice that the shaky hand taking this photo is not so shaky. My wife was doing this. She had a steadier hand. But isn't that neat? Sometimes we'd go out and open our hand and they'd just go. And sometimes they would do this, take a minute or so to get ready, to get the courage or the energy or whatever they do. And when we released them, we noticed that mostly when they go up, they'd go out in the open and they'd fly in a loop or a circle. And they're orienting themselves to what's to happen, orient to the sun and other things to figure out their way. I pointed south for them, but I don't think they needed that. So I got involved with this organization, Monarch Watch, University of Kansas. Professors there are the people who've been studying the migrations and doing the taggings. And they have a citizen science program where people like me can get involved. You can get wing tags from them with all the instructions on what to do and the kind of data they need for you to send back. And you can do that. So my wife and I, for 3 years, did some tagging. We tagged maybe 3 dozen, not many. Is 3 dozen going to save the population? No. But if a lot of people did 3 dozen, I don't know. But there's Monarch Watch, monarchwatch.org. You can go there, and it's information rich but easy to understand. The scientists who are doing this are great communicators. You don't have to have a PhD to understand what's going on. So they have this program out bringing back the monarchs and this tagging program. I've got some of the tags here I can show you after if you want to see. One of the things you need to tell the scientists is male or female. Well, how do you know? Well, this is the way. The male has these pouches on the wings. You really have to look that are involved with a chemical pheromone-like process that helps with the mating, they think. So you need to tell them that. When you report your data, you need to tell them where and when, give them a zip code, give them an address, male or female, give them a date and time, and some other things so they can keep a good account of what's going on. And these are the wing tags. You can see they're about as big around as the eraser on a pencil. And they've got the information on the tag, what to do if you find it. And they're neat because the tags act like a little postage stamp. You peel it off and you gently put it on the wing, make sure it's on there snugly. And if you put it in the right place, there's this one place right on that see, can I do this? Ooh, right there is where you place it on the butterfly, on that particular cell of the wing. And if you put it there, then it won't impede the flight, it won't come off, and it'll help the scientists understand what's going on. These are a couple of them that we did. That little tiny thing will fly 3,000 miles? So, what can we do here? Well, there's lots of things we can do, and I'm not sure what you may already be doing here at Asbury, but I'd like to offer up some ideas. And first of all, plant and grow milkweed. You know, the Fish and Wildlife Service is, in their regulations, is suggesting that people need to do this. Help us out here. Help us replace the lost milkweed. And so when I've done these programs around the community and over in Virginia, I always take some seed pods with me. I've got some here tonight. Some seed pods, and I give them to the people and encourage them to plant milkweed. And the kind of nectar flowers that the butterflies like to get their meal while they're flying. And then there's this bit about the Monarch Way Station. I'll say more about this because I think we could do this here. And I think we could do some tagging as well. But, you know, perhaps the thing that I do that may have the most help to monarchs is not the tagging of the 3 dozen or whatever. It's helping to spread the word. And I've enjoyed doing this, and I've appreciated the Historical Society helping to sponsor me to do this. I'm a volunteer. I get no pay for this. I get the joy of doing it. And so kind of helping to spread the word. And I've done that with garden clubs, with churches, a couple of schools. In fact, one of the schools here in Gaithersburg, the Catholic school on Summit Avenue, Summit and 355, Yes. I was there a couple of months ago and did the program and gave them some seeds. They were interested to have the seeds for their flower garden. So we'll see what happens there. And before I get back, I'm going to take a little detour here. This is we here at Asbury, and this is the placard sign along the sidewalk that overlooks the ponds right across the street from the front door here at Roseboro. Let me blow this one up. So these are the two ponds that with the nice fountains and the geese. And this pond down here is the one that has the docks and Iona Island. But what I want to do here, there's a couple of places right here, kind of sunken meadows like, that have a lot of milkweed. So let's go over here. I blew that up a bit. And this is what they look like in this aerial photo. I think that these two areas they're low-lying areas. I think these are areas that receive site drainage. You know, when it rains, the site runoff goes there, and then it can be filtered in the ground before it reaches the ponds, I'm guessing. But there's a lot of milkweed there. Let me show you that. Here's what it looks like. This was last fall. This was September or October when I was walking down there. The milkweed plants, these milkweed had not yet opened and dispersed their seeds. So it's probably before October. And they're still green on the trees. But these two areas, and there's another little area too with a lot of milkweed around here. And it's nice to see this. And I'm wondering, went back a bit, I'm wondering, one of the things I'm wondering if we could do here to encourage more milkweed, just because, would be to influence how the lawn is mowed here. And that is, don't mow down too close to these areas where the milkweed is. In fact, I'd give them a little buffer, and maybe even let this part in the middle come out here if I can. Over here. Let this part in the middle now has a picnic table sitting on it. Maybe let that go. Don't mow it. And see if the milkweed can expand a bit. I don't know if that would be possible or helpful, but that's, one thing to think about. And then, this was last fall in the community gardens. That's a Wallace building behind it. Mary and I saw a bunch of monarchs there. One day we were there for an hour or two. We saw a lot of monarchs. So I'm thinking that maybe something we could do is in the fall, when the monarchs are migrating and coming to that food source, those wonderful flowers in the garden, maybe we could get some butterfly nets, and we could catch a few of those butterflies, tag them right there, and release them, and participate in the program. I would guess that if we could get some folks interested to do that, and we had enough monarchs in the fall, we could probably tag and release several dozen, which would be kind of cool. I'm not saying I don't want to get involved in raising the caterpillars. That's very laborious. But with a place like the community gardens here that attracts the butterflies, that's perfect. That's perfect. And then the Monarch Watch program, those scientists in Kansas, have a program to certify your habitat as a monarch way station. And I've got the information about that and what to do. And it requires having milkweed and nectar flowers. And it's very easy. It's for your backyard. So they say it needs to be about 100 square feet or larger. There needs to be at least 10 milkweed plants and the nectar flowers, so that the butterflies can come in, get a meal, and lay their eggs, or lay their eggs and get a meal. And we look around Asbury here. We've got all that milkweed by the ponds, and we've got all those flowers in the garden. I think we would easily meet the criteria for becoming a certified monarch way station. And if we do that, You get a certificate with your name on it and all that, and you can even get a plaque to put out in your garden to demonstrate what you're doing and to conserve monarchs. So I'm thinking maybe that's something else we could think about. And for doing things like affecting the mowing and doing this officially with a certificate, we'd need to go through the proper channels here at Asbury and get the right permissions and approvals or whatever is required to do that. But wouldn't it be kind of neat to do that? Thank you. And then lastly, a couple of things. This, I need to show you. If you don't already know it, can you see this? Yep. Mr. McGinty's Monarchs. This is a wonderful kid's book. My granddaughter, a few years ago, she was 5 or 6 years old, and we were visiting, and she gave me this, and she said, "Grandpa, you're going to love this book." And it's about this man named Mr. McGinty who sees the milkweed plants being cut down, and he goes and he captures the caterpillars, and takes them home, and did kind of like what I was talking about, and he raises them, and he goes and gets the school kids involved, and they all start raising the caterpillars. And it's a great kid's story. It's a great kid's story. So I have no personal interest in this, just that I love it. If there's a young person in your life whom you like to talk to, read with, teach about nature, Mr. McGinty might be able to help you out. So I'll have this out here, and you can look at that. And the other one, the other book, is this one. This is the best book I have found that talks about all the aspects of monarchs, including the subjects you've heard today and many others, and about how to grow milkweed. And it's written by a person who has done the raising at home and is a journalist, not a scientist, a journalist who's pulled together the information in a very readable format. If you really want to dig into monarchs and want something easy to read, this is it, The Monarch by Kylie Brownlee. I'll have this one out here too if anybody wants to see it. Just because. If you want to talk more or whatever, I'll be glad to do whatever I can. And I'm just around the corner.
Can you take Q&A, please?
Yes, sir. Will some microphones find their way? Yes. Okay. I was talking to a lady here at the beginning, Donna, is that right? Who's wearing monarch earrings. I've got my lapel thing, but they don't match the earrings. Yeah, and she was doing some of these things that we've been talking about here, so we've got someone else with some experience. Well, stand up. Turn around. I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I have the Monarch Way Station. I'm certified.
Are you?
I leave it in my car, and I brought it with me. It's in my courier cabinet.
So you can help us do this. You've been there.
She lives in Wallace. Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
We tried. My son tried to grow them in our backyard. We've been doing it for many years. There are a lot of predators.
Yes.
For them, which I think you should tell people about. And I also have a question about those red beetles. Do they eat them as well? On those red beetles that show up on the.
As far as I know, the red beetles are just their food
eating
source is the flowers and the nectar. I'm gonna.
So I was just curious about. They have a lot of predators.
See what I can do here. Yeah, when you're talking about predators, I'm gonna scroll down to something that's off my slideshow because you asked. There, can you see that? This was out in my backyard when I was watching things, and there was this chrysalis that looked like this. It had been attacked, and obviously this is part of the mortality of getting attacked by something. And then there was another one that was the last one of the year. I thought, oh, there's just one more. I'll bring it in. And I did put it in my tent, and I noticed, turned dark, and I thought, oh, it's on the way. Turns out that it had been parasitized by this. This looks like a housefly, but it's called a taconid fly, and it's one of the main predators on monarchs and other insects. And it lays its egg in the chrysalis, which kills the chrysalis, and then the egg falls out, and the fly emerges. And this all happened in my butterfly tent, so I let it happen, and I captured that fly so I could take its picture and do this. Let's see here. And another source of mortality was this. I was sitting on the back deck one day, and a bird brought this over and flopped it down on the deck. I was trying to eat it and then spit it out because they're very untasty. But the butterfly was dead. So another source of mortality. The taconid fly being attacked, the chrysalis being attacked, the butterfly falling and losing its grip. Do you want to say anything else about that, man? Are you about the mortality?
We lost it to spiders.
There is a spider that is a predator.
Yeah, there were several spiders that we weren't sure. We just, you'd come out and you'd see them, and we were watching the little caterpillars and stuff, but a lot went down, so I was curious what you can do about that.
Yeah, there's some spiders that do that, and there's also a couple of wasps that also will attack. I'm not sure what you can do about it. I wouldn't spray in my yard to get rid of them because that's dangerous to other things. So in some ways you have to live with the natural mortality, which is why I started bringing them inside, see if I could thwart that. But did I really?
You mentioned the tags. What information is on the tags?
Let's see here. I'll show you, actually. Got all your answers are here. This is what they look like. And on the tag, it has a contact information and a tag number. And you really have to read it. Look at it.
Telephone number.
I'm gonna have to get my eyeglasses now. Can you pass this back to that so we can better look at those?
I have two questions and a comment. Quick questions.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I live in Diamond on the 11th floor, and if I planted milkweed, would the monarchs come up there?
I'm inclined to say yes. That would be a good experiment. I was always really curious. We lived in Aspen Hill in a 1950s neighborhood, Wheaton Woods. We had a small yard, but it was wildlife habitat. And with the milkweeds, how did the monarchs find my little space in this neighborhood in suburban Washington, D.C.? I don't know, except that with the milkweed, there maybe they can detect it in the air from some miles away. But I'm guessing that if you had a couple of milkweed plants, you might see monarchs. It'd be worth doing. I think it would be worth doing.
Thank you. And if one were to catch a monarch and tag him, what advice would you give to us for handling the monarch butterfly to tag it?
Well, we decided that it took two of us to do the tagging, just to be careful. And so when it came time, I'd unzip the net, I would go in it and I would catch the butterfly, pull the wings together and hold it gently, bring it down, and I would hold the butterfly, and my wife had this little process, and she'd apply the stamp, and we'd make sure it was on there. But you have to hold the butterfly. It doesn't hurt them. And as long as you're just pinching them closed and not rubbing the wings, just pinching it, apply the tag, and we'd go outside and release it.
Sadly, my comment is we were visited about 6 weeks ago in D.C. by a monarch.
Thank you. Down here in the front. Jill?
What happens to the tags? I mean, when the butterflies die, does someone go and find them and retrieve the tags and report it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that I don't know whether it's the Mexican government or the World Wildlife Fund participating, have a program where they will, I think it's like, bring us a tag for $5. They have a monetary incentive for the people in Mexico, at least, to find them there. But many monarchs that are tagged get caught between here and Mexico. And it happens to be, one got hit by a car and somebody finds it. You see it in your backyard, you say, what's going on there? And you go catch it. So it's kind of hit and miss. The scientists in Kansas have tagged about 2 million butterflies over the last couple decades. Their return rate is 1%. 2 million butterflies at 1% is 20,000. So they need to tag a lot of butterflies to get the data to help them understand what's going on, because it's not a big return, and it's in some ways it's haphazard whether you find it or not. If you ever been a fisherman and you get a tagged fish, if you're fishing for rockfish or striped bass on Chesapeake Bay, you might catch a fish that's got a tag in it that the state conservation department applied to it for some study reason. They find that, you turn it in, but you're out there trying to catch the fish. Nobody's trying to catch the butterflies. So it's a lot of hit and miss, I think, Joe.
One more question, please. One more question.
I came here from Bowie, and we had a member of our church who raised butterflies in his garage, his house, everywhere. And he had many incubators. He organized our church to keep him in milkweed. Ooh. And then when it came time for the caterpillars to become butterflies, he would bring them to church, and he would put them on the children's noses, and then they would tag them there.
Oh.
And
it works.
It was really nice. I mean, they stayed on the children's nose, and then when they'd been tagged, they would decide to fly away. And I have 2 books that he published about his things. I will loan them to you.
Oh, yes, please.
But he used them to raise money for our food pantry. And his son is a astronaut, and his son went with his father down to where they go in Mexico, and he has pictures and everything of that. So
That's great, thank you. Do you think we could do something here?
His name is Dick Arnold. His presentation is 2.5 hours.
Very detailed. Yes, thank you.
Your question is, can we do something here?
Do you think we could do some of this conservation here, maybe with the growing of the milkweed, the mowing around, I don't know about that, but maybe even the capturing and tagging and releasing? Terrific. Yeah? Okay. We'll work on it. Thank you, Frank.